Hi there, and welcome to another edition on Busternet. Today, we wrap up making the best tactic possible. In FM16 or FM15 or any other FM, the way I've played over the years has been pretty standard. I always take a top team and I use them as a baseline because things that work with the best team in the land will act as your baseline, and then you can use the principles from there to go and see whether they can work on lower league sides. A lot of people that have struggled in the past usually try to do things with lower league sides, and then because the attributes they're not optimal, they struggle and they can't find out what's wrong. So how do you find out if your tactic is actually balanced? The only way you're gonna do that is to be able to go into a match with a top side, take that tactic and try it out there. If it works there, then you know the tactic is sound. However, if you wanted to try the same thing out with Doncaster Rovers, or if you wanted to try it out with a non-league side, it's not going to be the same thing. It's going to be a lot harder because the players don't have the attributes. So you need to find out if it's the system or the player. And to find that out, you need to create a baseline tactic, and you need to find out if your tactic is balanced. Step 1, test it out on Football Manager Touch with a top league side. Step 2, make sure that your tactic is balanced in the number of duties that you choose. Duties affect your transitions. If you have too many attack duties, these players will focus their work during the attacking phase only. The only way you're going to make them drop back is by changing a mentality, and even then not every one of them is going to come back. So you need to make sure that you have the right distribution of duties in your team. So if you're looking at your midfield and you're asking yourself, I want to get these players back defending, then you have to make sure that the players you want tracking back during a defensive phase have support duties on them. If you have a player with a defend duty, this player is just going to hold back all the time. So having the correct distribution of duties is going to be key. Having a balanced setup in your midfield, making sure that you have pivots who actually help to balance the team's attack out is also going to be important. If you have players who are on attack duties, you have to make sure that they have players around them who can pick up the slack when they are not around to defend. 3, when you're making a tactic, make sure you know who is going to come back to defend and who is going to go up to attack. So you need to know your with and without ball positions when your team is what. 3, make sure that you have a clear idea of your with and without ball screens. They don't show up here, so you need to use your imagination. The best way to do that is to make sure that you understand the players who have an attack duty will generally be a lot more higher during an attacking or even during a midfield transition. So these players may leave pockets of space behind them. When you create any kind of a system, that's the first thing you want to do. They will drop back into these positions when they are defending. This will be the positions they take up. However, your attacking players will probably have to track back. And when that happens, you need players around them supporting them. So whenever you're making any system, the first thing you want to do is think about your defensive transitions. You want to be looking at which players are going to come back to help support the team in defense, and which players are going to be going up to attack, so that you end up making a balanced system. In this example, we have a fullback on attack. So what we do is we make sure that in front of him there are players on support, so that when he goes up to attack, we know that these two guys are going to track back. You also want to make sure that the players' attributes surrounding this role are good. So in this case, we want to make sure that this player, number Bonucci, is going to have the right attribute. He's going to be a very good defender because he will need to be able to step into the plate and take away his duties if needed, or step up and mop up when Alexandro decides to go and attack. Furthermore, you may want to look at when you have an attacking duty here, then if he bombs forward, he's going to put up a lot. He's going to go charging up the field. We have 2 players here on support. Why are they on support? Because they are dropping down to give him support, so that when he goes up, they are around to help him out. You can also play a system. Whenever you create any kind of a system, the thing you want to make sure is you have a good idea what you're doing. Here we could easily change this guy into a complete forward on attack, and he ends up becoming a target point for the rest of the team. So in this particular instance, you may want to think about how you're going to have a central support for these players. Here you only have an F9 dropping deep, and he's probably going to run down the flanks. So you probably would need somebody here to take up an attacking role so that he can come into this hole here to support these two players, so that you don't have Dybala doing all the work by himself. So now in this setup, you have an attacking playmaker charging up the pitch. We have another winger attacking this side, and then you have an F9 dropping deep so that they can all support each other. Whenever you create any kind of a system, you have to think about the defensive transition where players are going to be dropping back to defend. That's the first thing that you know to start out. When you want to look at how you're going to try and score goals, then you need to look at the players and how they're going to be moving to spaces to support each other. And then in order for you to find out if it's working, you need to pay a lot of attention to your transitions. And that will be the focus of the next portion of our video, where we could take a look at transitions and how we try to spot if the right players are supporting each other. Once you have a tactic that looks like it's working with what we call a baseline side, then if you were to take it back to your career save, say with another club, or who may not be as good as your baseline save, then you'll be looking at why would your Juventus team be doing so well. Here, find the final piece of the puzzle. You are looking at players' attributes, and you're going to try and sort out why there is such a gap between a team that you might be managing. Like in my case, I have Torino. So Torino is my career save, and I might have a Juventus, or I might have a Barcelona save. That's my baseline save, which I usually do during the testing period of any new patch, or when there's a beta. That's how I test my tactics out. I test the system out to see whether it's working correctly, and usually it is. So in this particular case, let's take an example of this defender. Now he might be playing really well for Juventus, and then when I go to my Torino save, I might find that the same tactic may not work, and I'm asking myself, why the heck is it not working? This is when you need to look at attributes. In this particular case, I'll be looking at his attributes and going, okay, why is this guy able to tackle the ball well as opposed to my own fullback in Torino? Why is he not closing down? Why is he not making the tackles? Then we look at his attributes, and then I will be able to tell the difference and what I need to do in order to make it work in Torino. Here we have a player with an aggression of 16, anticipation of 15, and bravery of 18, and his physical attributes are also pretty good. Pace of 16, acceleration of 14, stamina of 15. So Caceres is actually a very, very dangerous player and a very good player, and he will go in and make those tackles when he needs to make those tackles. And then I will know, oh, that's the difference between him and my player. My player just doesn't have the aggression. My player doesn't have the anticipation, and he's always slow on the turn. And we have had this problem with one of my fullbacks on the left flank, Gaston Silva, who has been shipping in goals. And is it because of the tactic, or is it because of the player? Now I know that the baseline tactic works. It's the player that's at fault. So what do we do? This is when we have to consider ourselves and start asking ourselves, do we want to do a Moreno? Now, if Alberto Moreno can only go up and attack and cannot defend, what do? You tell the player to take him off his attacking duties, and you tell him not to make those kind of runs. You tell him to stay back. You tell him to play less risky passes, and you make sure that there are players around him to cover for him. So this is what you need to do. You need to find out if your baseline tactic works. Once you've done that, if it doesn't work with your league side save, then you need to look at the player's attributes, because there is going to be a divergence. Whether you like it or not, you will find a divergence. And when you do, that's how you know what to fix. Like now that you've got all the pieces of the puzzle together, your final piece is going to be spending a lot of time looking at the game and trying to see what's wrong. And that is where transitions come in. Before I go to transitions, here's a quick tip. How do you analyze your game? What I do is I always save my matches that I've played in, the matches that I may have not played really well in. I will always save PKMs so that I can go back and analyze. Now, the beauty about saving a PKM and analyzing it via a PKM as opposed to watching highlights is this. A, you can actually see the flow in terms of the stats. B, when you play the match, you can opt to play through the match from the start, as opposed to show final result and stats. Because when you actually watching highlights from show final results and stats, you won't be able to tell about turns in the match, phases of the match, at which point does AI change tactics, because the AI will only show you the final tactic. When you opt to save those matches as PKMs, then you'll be able to view your match. Remember that they will be stored in the folder called matches in your documents folder. Then you have all these PKMs, and you can go in and analyze any PKM that you want and to see how your team played during a game. This is a match Torino played against Lyon, so you can see the start screen. So this is a match, one of the PKMs I am loading up is the match between Torino and Lyon in the Champions League, which we didn't really play very well. And you can see, the moment you've loaded the PKM up, you don't see anything else, like everything is like the start of a match. The highlights, the match stats, everything is perfect. You can see the formations, we have a 4-3-3 that we're using against the narrow system, and you look at the stats, there'll be blank, there'll be nothing here, match stats. So in terms of analysis, nothing else is happening. We do know they will include the substitutions. So here we have perfect. It's perfectly set up for you to analyze. So if you can go straight to the pitch like that, you set up your screen, you can see that our mentality at the start was defensive. Now the game is gonna recognize the mentality changes that you make during a match. So if you start out with any tactic, you can call it whatever name you want to call it. It will have its own convention, AI convention stored here. So my system may be called FM Walla Walla Boom Boom. The system still recognizes it as a defensive 4-3-3 wide. And the away formation will be 4-4-2 diamond narrow. Now, when it does not show any mentality, we know it's either standard or control. If it was defensive, a counter, it will stay defensive. If it's attacking, it will say attacking. So if it doesn't say anything, it just says 4-4-2 diamond narrow, it's definitely either standard or control. So we knew that at the start of this match, even though we were at home, we shouldn't have been so defensive against them. I made that was my first error in judgment in this game. So you can go up to your highlights and opt to whether you wanted to watch it in key, extended, comprehensive, or full. In this particular case, we want to see what it feels like to watch a game in key. So whenever I coach other players on playing this game, I will be watching PKMs that they submit, and this is how I'll be analyzing the PKMs. So I'll be looking at transitions through these PKMs, and whenever I do really badly, that's the same thing as well. I'll start looking at my own failed transitions. I won't bother about kickoffs. I never do. You'll be wanting to look at things like for example, who has more highlights. So we start off with the first highlights, our highlight, which tells me, okay, good, not too bad, we're doing pretty all right. But Z Gomez, during the attacking transition, was isolated. He was by himself. He had to hold up the ball, and we can see that when we lose possession, there's a huge gap between our defense and our midfield, and this leads us to a loss in shape. Remember about my aggression settings for Gaston Silva? Now he failed to tackle when he should have tackled. He failed to close this player down. This is another thing that leads me to look at, okay, all right, something might be wrong with my defender and the screen in front of him. So the transition, our defensive transition was very poor. The way we got back, the shape we had, we were too close to our line. You can see how our players are strung inside our own penalty box. We are way too deep defensively. We are giving them too much room to play. So I would need to change my mentality, which I would eventually. I went to attacking a few minutes later, and you can see that the team now looks higher up the pitch. We're closing, we're a lot more aggressive, a bit higher up the pitch. And I'm looking at how we look back in our shape when we lose the ball. Here they're going to another transition. They're about to launch into attack, and I'm looking at who are my players coming in. And here, one of my players stepped up too high. Now, by becoming too aggressive, I knew then that we have an issue with one of my central defenders because he stepped up too early. All right, Bruno Perez had to drop in and make a tackle, and his tackle was late, and it became a professional foul, and he was sent off. And we had a whole bunch of problems creeping up. This position in this game, I had Bruno Perez on attacking duty. Now, because he was on attacking duty, he had to track back a long way to cover up the space, and the other midfielder, didn't do his role, his duty properly in terms of his anticipation. His anticipation wasn't good enough during the transition. So I had to change the support from, I had to change his duty from attack to support. So I had to bring in another player to play in that position. And after we did that, we changed the duty to support. We went and stabilized the match, and there were no more highlights. You can see now there are no key highlights, and that is actually a good for me because I'd rather not have any key highlights. So here, when you're watching highlights, like key highlights, you want to be looking to see who has more highlights. Though if your team is shown defending a lot, then you have an issue. If your team is shown attacking a lot, then you need to see whether or not your attacks are breaking down in the final transition. Here we have just moved the ball into an attacking transition. You can see that our players like Benazi, who's on defend duty, he has dropped deep, and we have a player Silva on support, Meza is on support. These three during this transition are working very well together. What I want to see is how well my center forward moves up in attack to support Meza. And I have a concern here about Paragini, who was on attack duty as well, and he didn't go into the box to support the player. So our transition and attack didn't look very good. Here I was not trying to do work ball into box. I was going for hit early crosses, and there was a need for me to make a change immediately. If I had chosen work ball into box, then Meza would have gone up the pitch, and Meza would have tried to hold up the ball or play to my center forward would have tried to hold up the ball for that rest to come in as well. And we had failed to do that. We were fairly lucky in this match, even though the stats showed that we had pretty much dominated the game, even though we were one man down. From a throw here, I don't really care about transitions from throws, okay? Essentially, I'm looking at how we come back to defend if we lose the ball. That is my key. So during a transition, when you have a throw in or a corner, you want to be paying a lot of attention to how your players come back. So you want to make sure that the right players are taking their set pieces in the right places, and you don't want to have a situation where you have, like for example, a defensive midfielder taking the throw in here. That's suicide. If you lose the ball here, that defensive midfielder is not going to be here anymore. And once again, we were okay. Yeah, we managed to score a goal. My performance wasn't fantastic because I wasn't really paying attention to how poorly we were doing in terms of transitions on one side of the pitch. On the right side of the pitch, both my fullbacks have shown that they are a bit weak, and I have to strengthen, play solid central defenders and solid midfielders in order to compensate for this. The failure in transitions here largely was down to my poor player selection. And as the match wore on, once again, if you're watching this game kind of a PKM, you'll be able to analyze how you do and how you perform. And the beauty about using PKMs like this is if you never ever known what it was like to watch a match in key highlights, this is how it's going to be. It's very enlightening because you will see more highlights of your own team if you're doing well, and you see more highlights of the opposing team if they're doing well. And if there's a highlight of one of your players screwing things up, then chances are that player is the one you have to substitute. So it's that easy. So, if you... but the scary thing about watching matches on key highlights is you can't make mistakes. So learning how to spot these transitions becomes the focus of the rest of my Torino Diaries saves. The one thing that you want to consider is this. Okay, when you're making a tactic and you're a team that's struggling, okay, you want to get promoted. So do you create a tactic that is outright attacking, or do you create a tactic meant to stifle? I would always recommend creating a tactic meant to stifle. Whenever I do my rapid consecutive promotions from non-league to Premiership, I always use systems which have got a static defense. A static defense is one where you have players who are playing in this position. They have a DM. All right, so you gotta have a DM or a halfback or a defensive midfielder or a deep line playmaker. Any DM in this position will make your system become a static defense. So what happens is this: you're gonna have these guys acting here as a trio. They will make it very hard for other teams to pass behind them or around them because you've got a DM here. So you don't get these two getting pulled out of position. And then what you can do is, if you're a non-league side, is turn these guys into attack, for example. Okay, when you do that, and you have the center forward attack, what you end up having is a system where you might end up seeing balls being pinged forward into spaces here for these guys to charge. So when you're playing as a team that's struggling, make sure that you beat them in some area of the pitch. And I usually beat them in areas of pace, acceleration, physicals largely, and first touch. So that when I ping these balls into spaces, these guys have the acceleration to beat other players and dropping crosses for my center forward to knock the ball into the goal. And that's what I do on the break, and I do that a lot. And I'm very, very conservative when I'm playing as a team that's lower down the leagues, because I will beat other teams basically on physicals. So that is the final piece of the puzzle that you need to consider. When you are creating any kind of a tactic, baseline it first. Find out if it works with a top team. If it works with a top team, it should work with your team. Then it's a matter of attributes. Secondly, if you are in a league where you are struggling, then don't try to play a tactic that other people are scoring 150 goals with, because it's been set up for the team. You play based on what you have, and then you try to exploit certain advantages against the AI. So you want to bomb down the flanks, you want to have players who are physically better than the opposition. That's where you focus, and then you try and make it very hard for the AI to score against you. It's better to walk away with a point when you're struggling than to walk away with nothing. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of the show. It is a simplified summary of everything I've done, and the focus of my future shows on Torino Diaries will be to spot transitions and try to help you guys spot these transitions too. And if you have any questions, you know where you can find me. You can find me on addicted2fm.com, or you can hunt me down on Twitter. My handle is @BusterNet. I hope to hear from you guys again soon. For now, I'm off. Bye bye.